We will start by creating a new composition, and we want it to be a DV file, a TSD DV file, so I'll click OK. And what we're going to drag into that is this volleyball. And if you notice, the volleyball does not look round, but it is round, so we'll need to make a pixel correction. So we're going to click up in this little window up here, click and hold, and we're going to slide down to View Options and release the mouse, and we're going to click Pixel Aspect Ratio Correction, and it will fix the problem for us. Okay. Now this lesson is to help you guys get a better handle on how you can use anchor points creatively. So right now I'm going to hit the letter R, and you can see that we've got this ball, and it's spinning around the center like it would. And in this final comp, what we're going to do is the ball is going to kind of bounce off the floor several times and then out of frame. Now we want the ball to spin around its center, but when we get down to when it hits the ground, what we want it to do is to squish on the floor. And so we need the anchor point to go there so that when we hit the letter S and we scale, it'll squish. Actually, I'm sorry. Let's break this loose. I just want to do the vertical squish. I just want it to squish, right? So we need two different anchor points to make this work. So how are we going to make this happen? We will start with by clicking on volleyball. You can either control or right click, and you're going to hit Precompose, and that is, we'll call it volleyball. Let's call it spinning volleyball. And we'll move all the attributes into comp 2. Now we will double click on this comp, and that will open it. And you'll see that this comp is 5 seconds long, and when we go to comp 2, it's also 5 seconds long. And these will always remain in sync. So let's say we're here at second 3 in comp 2, and we're here at second 3 in comp 1. So let's make comp 2 more an easier to recognize name. So I'm going to hit Command K, and we'll call it bouncing volleyball final. Okay. So first thing we want to do is have our volleyball spin, and so we'll just set a rotation point here at the beginning of the comp. I'm going to hit N to go to the end, and let's have it make 2 full revolutions for right now. We'll see what that happens. Now, when we go into this comp, into our main comp, you'll see that it is spinning. All right. Before we go much farther, let's add a black background to this comp. So I'm going to hit Layer, New, Solid, and I'm going to click on the color and tell it to be black. Hit OK, and then we will pull that behind. Now, this comp has our centered anchor point to keep the ball spinning in a true circle. Now this anchor point we can move. I've got the pan behind tool activated. We can move this anchor point down to the bottom of the ball. You see that that doesn't affect the spinning because that's happening in another comp. And now we can mess with the scale. First of all, I'm going to keep this link together, and we're going to scale the ball down into something that'll be a little more fun to bounce. And now, when the ball does touch the ground, I need to get into the selection tool. When the ball does hit the ground, now we can bring the link and we can squish the ball a little bit, make it seem a little more realistic. Okay. So let's start by make sure we're in the selection tool. We'll start with the ball out, a frame and high, and we will click position. Then at 1 second, we will have the ball hit the ground about here, right on the ground. At about second 2, we'll have the ball jumping up in the air again. It won't go quite as high, right? Actually, we could even start this a little higher. It won't go quite as high as our initial mark because the ball is losing energy. So now here at second 3, it will bounce about there. And then at second 4, it will bounce out of frame. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Alright, so our paths don't look really very believable yet, right? So let's go ahead and pull in some Bezier handles to make them look a little more natural. These are to break the link. So basically, these are linked. And to break the link, you just need to hold the option button down. And that'll kind of give it a bouncier start. Come on now, baby. There we go. Here we want it to give it a little hang time in the air. And I'm holding the option button down to break that link so that it bounces up a little more. First we'll tighten it, break the link, and we jump out of frame. Alright, let's see what that looks like. Alright. So the problem is that this doesn't look very realistic unless it was a slow motion shot. We do know that these guys would be closer together. The second bounce would happen quicker from point A to point B, so I'm going to move them closer. But we also want to move the whole thing in to make it happen faster. And we want it to bounce out faster. And we'll shorten this up. And let's see what that looks like. Okay. So we want this to happen quicker. So we'll slide it down. We want this to happen quicker. That seemed to accelerate in speed, which is not what we want. Slide it out just a little bit more. Alright, so that looks fine. Now what we want to do is we want our ball to squish. And so I'm going to hit the page up to go one frame before this. And we want to keyframe our scale so it's normal. And one frame after, we want to hit the keyframe here so it's a normal scale. Now we'll go when it's on the ground. And we will squish it a little bit. Let's see what that looks like. Looks a little rubbery nice, doesn't it? So when we hover over it, boing, okay. So what we will do is we'll copy those keyframes, copy, paste. And you'll see that it'll paste the keyframe wherever the head is, so the playhead. So we want it up the center. If you want it to seem more rubbery, we can drag this keyframe out a couple frames. So it gives it a second to recover. All right. Now I want to look at something else. Let's go back to our spinning ball. Remember, we made it 2 revolutions. So I'm going to go to that end keyframe. Let's make it 3. Let's see if the ball spinning more looks better. Now let's render it. Now let's try 4. End. Okay, so that looks better. Although there's this weird hiccup right here. It seems to, looks like we need to make this fatter. Yeah, that's a better hang time. All right. Now, the last thing we want to do before we render is we want to click motion blur here in the file, and if we want to see it when we do our RAM preview, we want to click motion blur right there as well. It'll print it with motion blur when we render it, and just having that little bit of blur just makes the whole motion that much more believable. And so you will render that